realmente un gusto para mí poder presentar esta charla el día de hoy. Esta charla del profesor Jospeh Harrington es posible por una actividad conjunta e interdisciplinaria entre el Departamento de Economía, del cual casi la mayoría de los estudiantes aquí son parte, entre la maestría de Derecho de la Empresa, de la cual algunos somos parte, y del estudio Mula, Falla, Escurra. En esta oportunidad tenemos a Jospeh Harrington, quien, como muchos de ustedes saben, es coautor de un libro de texto que para muchos de nosotros, no debo decir ha sido, sino es inspirador. Y espero que para muchos de los estudiantes también. Nos acompaña también Diego Petrecolla. No quiero decir el número de años que lo conozco, que tengo el gusto de conocerlo y saber que no solo es una excelente persona, sino un excelente economista y que trabaja en temas precisamente de competencia y regulación. Al profesor Harrington, que algunos dirían no necesita tanta presentación. El profesor Harrington es el Patrick T. Harker Professor of Business Economics and Public Policy en la Escuela de Negocios Wharton, que es una de las más prestigiosas de los Estados Unidos en la Universidad de Pensilvania. Diego Petrecolla, por su parte, es PhD de la Universidad de Illinois en Urbana-Champaign, es docente universitario, consultor de un conjunto de agencias de competencia de las Américas, incluyendo el INDECOPI, y ha sido presidente de la Autoridad de Competencia en Argentina.
First of all, it's a real pleasure to be here, and you are in the right place, even though the slides suggest otherwise. What I'm going to be presenting is a shortened version of a talk that I'll be giving this evening. So as it says there, what this talk is about is trying to understand cartels, and having understood them, trying to find them out there in the economy. So let me start by describing a particular case which will bring out a number of the issues that I want to cover today. So this is a case concerning NASDAQ. Now NASDAQ is a stock market in the US, and our concern in it is with regards to the market for an individual security. So if you want to buy or sell a share of Microsoft's stock, you have to work through what's called market makers. Okay, so there's a market for Microsoft stock. So NASDAQ encompasses many markets within it. There's a market for Microsoft stock, there's a market for Intel stock, for Apple stock, and so forth. Market maker makes their money through the difference between what they buy and sell shares at. What's called the bid-ask spread. And we can think of that as the price-cost margin or the profit margin. Okay? Now, the way this market operates is that you want to buy a share of, let's say, Microsoft. You put in your order. Whichever market maker gives you the best price, that's who's going to get the order, going to get a chance to execute it. Okay, so market makers compete for orders through the prices that they're willing to buy and sell shares. As backdrop, I want to point out an interesting anomaly that was discovered by two professors at Vanderbilt University. They're Christie and Schultz. And what they observed was the following. Out of 71 out of 100 markets that they examined, they noticed that the market makers would not quote in odd eighths. That is, they would quote, let's say, $50 to buy a share of Microsoft stock, and 50 and a quarter, but not 50 and an eighth. So if we look at this figure here, look at the right side. So what this figure is the percentage of quotes from market makers that were in odd eighths. And one of the things they noticed is that when market makers went from quoting in both odd eighths and even eighths to not quoting in odd eighths, the spread would go up. Because what it was is that there's now a minimum spread of a quarter. You would quote, let's say that you'd be willing to sell a share at 10.25 and willing to buy a share at $10. And so the minimum spread would be 1/4. And what this figure shows is indeed how the spread went up when they switched to avoiding odd eighths. So this 0 here, that's the day at which, for a particular market, say for Intel stock, all the market makers switched to only quoting in even eighths. And then this figure here is the average across all these different markets, the market for Intel stock, or Microsoft stock, so forth. And what we observe here is at the time at which they started avoiding odd eighths, we see a big jump in the spread. And once again, just think about that spread as being the profit margin. So what do we have here? Market makers seem to anonymously avoid quoting in odd eighths. Secondly, when they started to engage in that practice, their profits went up. So Christie and Schultz went about trying to understand what was going on here, and ultimately concluded that the market makers were colluding, which is kind of interesting because if you take something like a Microsoft stock, there were probably 50 to 60 market makers, people whose job it was to execute these orders, who are supposedly competing from the orders from people like you and me when they submit them in order to buy and sell shares. Now, I kind of go over this case because it really highlights kind of 3 points, that I want to make today. The first point is that certain market conditions are conducive to collusion, and in particular, markets in which there's a homogeneous good or service, and that buyers largely make their decisions based upon price. A second point is that collusion, well, sometimes it can get pretty complicated, but often it involves very simple rules. And that's what allowed it to work here, because as I mentioned, this is not 3 or 4 firms engaging in some sort of collusive arrangement. This was sometimes as many as 50 or 60. And one of the things that allowed them to kind of effectively collude was the implementation of this very simple rule: just don't quote in odd eighths. And the third point here is that collusion can be detected using market data. Now, in addressing the question of, well, where does collusion occur? Where does cartels pop up? It's useful to think about, well, what is necessary in order for that to occur? And I like to think of there being kind of 3 conditions that need to be satisfied. The first is a stability condition. Because what you're talking about here is firms that were competing are now trying to put together some sort of collusive arrangement. Now, that's going to put constraints on their behavior. For example, that they all raise their prices. But that means there's going to be a temptation for a cartel member to undercut the collusive price in order to pick up more market share. So the challenge here is for firms, cartel members, to find a stable collusive arrangement, one that all the cartel members want to abide by. And that's going to entail monitoring for compliance with the whatever the collusive agreement is, and then punishment in the event of non-compliance. The second condition is participation. Okay, that even if there is, in principle, a collusive arrangement that they would be willing to abide by, they have to have an interest in terms of pursuing it. And this gets down to, well, how much more money can we make if we collude? And finally, there's a coordination condition, which is the fact that even if there is some sort of collusive arrangement that would work, and we might want to achieve it, we still got to get there. Right now we're competing, and everyone understands we're competing. We have to somehow coordinate a change in our beliefs to where now we realize, okay, we're not going to compete anymore, we're going to collude. Okay, so let's think about when these types of conditions have to be satisfied. So let me just step back for a second. Think about firms competing, and what we know is that when buyers' decisions are based largely on price, that competition can be very intense. Firms they have a tendency to drive price down at cost. Why? Because, well, if customers, if you look at procurement auctions, similarly so. The contract goes to the lowest bidder. So once again, price is all that drives things. And then in a lot of intermediate good markets, where you have firms buying inputs, the fact is that the buyers have great sensitivity to the price. These are often homogeneous goods, cement, chemicals, paper, glass, and the like. The buyers themselves are very sophisticated. They're not going to be swayed by advertising on television. And so in those markets, buyers' decisions are largely based upon price. So if you think about it in these markets, going back to those conditions, well, are these types of markets? Think about, for example, market for cement, an important intermediate good. To what extent these conditions of stability, participation, and coordination are satisfied. From a monitoring perspective, what's nice here is that if all you're looking at is price, you just got to make sure everyone abides by the inclusive price. That price is observable, it's easy to monitor. And intermediate goods actually gets a bit challenging because while there may be a list price, in principle, the price could be negotiated between the buyer and seller. So maybe if you're a cartel member, you're not sure whether that rival firm who's also a member of the cartel is actually giving secret discounts. And so as a result of that, cartels often monitor it in terms of sales rather than in terms of prices. There certainly is a potentially severe threat for when there's evidence of non-compliance. And the threat is, hey, listen, we stop, if there's evidence of non-compliance, we'll go back to competing, and we know competition is very intense. Incentives for participation can be strong just because profits are so low under competition. You can earn a lot more money under collusion. Furthermore, for intermediate goods, the market demand is often fairly price inelastic. So if you raise price by a significant amount, market demand is not apt to go down much. And coordination is something that's can be fairly easy because it being a homogeneous good, we just need to coordinate on a price. So what we have here is in terms of when and where cartels form, there's no really easy answer to this, but one of the, I think, striking empirical regularities that comes out is that in markets for which buyers' purchase decisions are very sensitive to price, these are markets that are ripe for collusion, and you have many examples there. I think in some countries, collusion in those markets may be the norm. In other countries, collusion or competition rather may be the norm, but there may be some event that would nevertheless trigger firms to all of a sudden start colluding. And move on to the other topic I want to cover today, which is screening. Okay. So what we recognize is that some markets have cartels. We have some understanding about conditions which are conducive to cartels, which I've kind of just briefly touched upon thus far. And now it's a matter of trying to discover these cartels. And they can be discovered through a variety of means, but here what I want to focus upon is the role of really economists in terms of discovering cartels by using market data. Okay, now there's kind of two broad ways that you could use market data to try to uncover cartels. One is what's called a structural method, where you look at markets which have the types of conditions which are conducive to cartel formation, just like we've done over, whether it's a homogeneous product, fewer firms, so it's going to contribute more stable demand, excess capacity. And so what you're looking for is market conditions which are conducive to collusion. For reasons I don't have time to get into, I don't think that's a very kind of effective means for finding cartels. But really those are conditions conducive to cartel formation, but they don't really tell us that there's a cartel there at that moment. In contrast, behavioral screening, what it does is using data which would reflect the fact that there currently actually is a cartel. And I think that's a much more potentially promising method for uncovering cartels and what I want to discuss today. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is, in terms of screening for cartels, it's not an easy exercise, but I think what's also has to be recognized is that colluding is not an easy exercise either. I mean, firms face a lot of constraints. They got to make sure that everyone abides by the inclusive arrangement. There's no cheating. When there's cheating, there's got to be punishments. There may be non-cartel members who disrupt things. All those conditions and constraints potentially leave a trail for economists to find in terms of evidence of collusion. So let me just kind of give you kind of a flavor of the kind of things that one could potentially look for to find evidence of cartels. So let's think about trying to find evidence of the birth or death of a cartel. And here the key thing is that the entire purpose of firms colluding is to change the price generating process. That price was being generated under competition, that didn't give firms as much profits as they'd like. They want to change that. Okay, so what comes out of the market in terms of prices has to be different. That's the whole purpose of the cartel. And so what that means is that in principle, it's detectable if you have the right data and methods. Furthermore, there's certain regularities in terms of how firms collude, which one can look for in the data. So a common pattern, and I don't want to say it's universal, but a common pattern, as we mentioned, is that cartel formation is often preceded by a demand decline. Well, we see that in terms of a price decline. So if you see a sharp price decline, and then a sharp price increase, well, that's something that's associated with really the formation of a cartel. It was the price decline that induced firms to cartelize, and then the price increase is the manifestation of that collusion. So you can see it here in citric acid, sharp price decline, then a rise when they formed the cartel. For lysine, for graphite electrodes, you do not see it with beta carotene. And I put that up there just to indicate that it's not a universal property, but it is a common property that one could look for. Now, here's something that I'll just insert this thought to keep in mind is that whenever you kind of put in some sort of screening device, you always have to worry about the cartelist trying to be really smart and to avoid triggering the screen. Do they try to basically alter their behavior so that the competition authority who's ever conducting the screen doesn't trigger evidence of collusion? But you can think about them doing that in this case here by, for example, not raising prices sharply after they form the cartel. And they could do that. But of course it reduces their profits by doing that. And that's one of the things you want in terms of property of the screen, is that it's costly for the cartelist to avoid triggering it. And as long as it's costly, then the screen will have some power. If they happen to be close in distance to a school district, they're going to have a real advantage. And that's going to make it difficult for the cartel members to collude in their bids with respect to that school district. So they're going to have to compete. So in school districts where the cartel members are far away, they're forced to compete, so they set relatively low bids. In school districts for which the cartel members are close to, the non-cartel members are at a disadvantage, which allows the cartel members to collude, so they set relatively high bids. And it's because of this that we observe this kind of odd a property, which is that prices are actually decreasing in cost. How am I doing on time? Okay. Let's see here. As I mentioned, that low price variability is something else to look for in terms of trying to identify evidence of cartels. And as I said, I'm just going to use examples to kind of make the point here. This is from the urethane cartel. Urethane is a type of foam used in automobiles and the like. This is the problem about working in collusion. They're not very sexy products. I mean, they're the kind of things that firms need and so forth, but you don't read about in the newspaper. But they do ultimately impact the prices that you pay. So during the cartel, this red line here is the collusive price, and notice how flat that is relative to the green line, which is cost. Okay. Now, this is over here is the competitive period, and what we see here is the price that firms are charging the competitive period is very closely tied to movements in cost. So once again, this insensitivity of price to cost under collusion is something to look for in terms of the data. Let me skip that one. Another thing to look for is how the impact of a few firms or entry, how it can have a large impact on the market. You think about here entry. We expect under competition, it's going to lead to lower prices, but we expect generally that effect to be modest. One firm enters a market with 4 or 5 firms, prices go down a little bit. But there could be a very large effect from entry when there's a cartel, because that entry might destabilize the cartel. So it goes from a market with 4 firms colluding to now you have 5 firms competing because of entry. And this is something that, a fact that was used by the Mexican Competition Authority in uncovering a cartel in the provision of generic pharmaceutical products. So here is a period in which there was collusion. These are the bids, high and very little variability in the bids over time. So let me kind of stop there, but just to say that I think this is an area which has become extremely active in the last 20 years. Many jurisdictions throughout the world have been putting in place competition laws, and most importantly, starting to kind of seriously enforce it. I think economists here can play kind of a very important role in terms of the use of market data to both uncover and make the case against cartels. Thank you.
Profesor Harrington.
Mi comentario va a ir por el lado de cómo es la política pública contra los carteles en Latinoamérica, o sea, cómo es en el mundo desarrollado, cómo es en Latinoamérica y cómo debería ser en Latinoamérica, entonces, siguiendo el ejemplo de las experiencias de los países desarrollados. ¿Hay relación entre la política de competencia, la aplicación de la política de competencia y el crecimiento económico, o el crecimiento del PIB per cápita, o el desarrollo económico? Y la evidencia empírica muestra que sí, que evidentemente hay una relación directa entre las aplicaciones de política de competencia y el crecimiento económico. Entonces los latinoamericanos deberíamos prestar especial atención a esto. La política de competencia debiera estar, entre ellas el combate a los carteles, ¿no? Debiera estar en la política pública latinoamericana. Lentamente va apareciendo, pero lentamente. Entonces, primero, tienen que ser sancionados per se. Quiere decir, no me tengo que poner a demostrar cuál es el daño que causan. Causa un daño en sí mismo y automáticamente que sean detectados debieran ser sancionados. Y tienen que ser sancionados severamente. Las multas tienen que ser muy altas, porque tienen que desincentivar la promoción de carteles. ¿Qué quiere decir esto? Que la multa tiene que, más que compensar el daño que causan, si solamente la multa compensar el daño que causan, los miembros del cartel tienen incentivo para seguir haciendo el cartel. Entonces las multas tienen que ser muy altas. Las autoridades de competencia que los investigan tienen que ser independientes. Independientes quiere decir que no pueden estar capturadas por el sector privado, ni tampoco por el poder ejecutivo de turno, que podría utilizarlos de manera política o electoral. Ahora, todo esto que yo cuento no es suficiente para tener un efectivo combate a los carteles. La experiencia americana y europea muestra que en sus inicios ellos tampoco tuvieron mucho éxito en el combate a los carteles. Empezaron a tener efectividad en el combate a los carteles cuando instalaron o desarrollaron lo que llaman los programas de clemencia, los cuales el profesor Harrington mencionó en su presentación. ¿Qué son los programas de clemencia? Son programas de arrepentidos, donde el arrepentido del cartel denuncia a sus colegas del cartel y le da a la autoridad de competencia toda la prueba para que los sancionen, y a cambio de eso es eximido de la multa. Y el último instrumento necesario, que tampoco está presente en muchas legislaciones, es aquellos que son afectados por el comportamiento de los carteles debieran tener la posibilidad de ir a la justicia y reclamar daños y perjuicios por los daños ocasionados por el cartel, porque muchas veces, como el profesor Harrington, pueden ser desplazados del mercado, por ejemplo, o pueden incurrir en pérdidas significativas y debieran ser resarcidos por eso. Entonces, ¿cómo tiene que ser un efectivo programa de combate a los carteles? Carteles sancionados per se, o sea, sin necesidad de mostrar cuál es el daño que causa, sino que automáticamente que el Estado se sanciona. Agencias de competencia independientes, con buenos presupuestos para investigar, con posibilidad de allanar a las empresas en el sector privado, con programas de clemencia y con la posibilidad de que los agentes del sector privado que hayan sido perjudicados por el funcionamiento del cartel puedan acudir a la justicia y ser resarcidos por los daños que recibieron. Con esto termino y quedo a disposición de ustedes para cualquier pregunta que quieran hacer. Muchas gracias.
Gracias.
Buenas tardes. Yo tenía dos preguntas breves sobre los criterios de identificación de los carteles, ¿no? Como mostró en una slide, el proceso de screening era más efectivo mientras generaron más costos para para el contrato colusorio. Entonces me preguntaba si existen mecanismos desde la política pública que puedan hacer que el incremento del costo del cartel sea mayor, cosa que aumenta la efectividad del screening. Y por otro lado, si es que los criterios de identificación de un cartel se pueden llevar al ámbito político, entendiendo la colusión entre partidos políticos. Gracias.
Junto mis preguntas. Una para el profesor Petrecolla respecto de él mencionaba en su comentario la necesidad de tener agencias independientes, ¿no? En el tipo de mercados tenues que tenemos, con reducido capital humano, el tema de la independencia me parece a mí que es como que cuál es la salida en este entorno donde no tienes ni siquiera miles de expertos o partidos políticos que tengan centros de pensamiento y que puedan constituirse los expertos que tú puedas convocar para estos trabajos independientes, ¿no? ¿Hasta dónde tenemos que crecer antes de poder tener algo de confianza respecto de las agencias, de la independencia de quienes están en agencias de competencia o en reguladores? Eso en relación a tu comentario. En relación a la presentación del profesor Harrington, mi gran pregunta tenía que ver con si no entiendo mal, la propuesta que nos está haciendo es hey, mira los datos de precio de bolsa, de precio de acciones, ¿no? Y con eso puedes tener un patrón y darte cuenta de un conjunto de elementos que no necesitan ir a cerrar, no sé cómo se dice, ir a abrir puertas o conseguir computadoras con la policía, en todo un proceso judicial, policial, muy complicado, ¿no? Entonces, claro, en países como el Perú, claro, estamos creciendo mucho económicamente, pero nuestra bolsa de valores es, si queremos hacer una comparación, no sé, en términos de volumen, ¿qué fracción es respecto de lo que podrías encontrar en los Estados Unidos? En una palabra sencilla, es una bolsa raquítica, ¿no? Entonces, donde todavía el entorno económico en el Perú o en países como el Perú tienen pocas empresas que listan en bolsa, muchas empresas familiares, y donde efectivamente no vamos a tener el dato de precio de mercado que necesitamos. Solo para ilustrar y recordar un punto, 200 empresas en el Perú explican el 60% del PBI.
La respuesta es sí. En el corto plazo claramente va a haber conflicto con la política industrial, porque la política industrial en general tiende a proteger a algunos sectores a través de subsidios o de exenciones impositivas o con protecciones tarifarias, arancelarias o pararancelarias. Entonces en el corto plazo claramente va a haber un conflicto entre la política industrial y la política de competencia. No debiera haberlo en el mediano y largo plazo. Y hay algunos ejemplos, quizás un poco lejanos para los latinoamericanos, pero yo creo que es importante señalarlos. El caso australiano es un caso muy interesante. Australia, a principios de los 80, se encontró con que su industria tenía problemas de competitividad muy severos y que no podían competir en igualdad de condiciones con otras economías. Y implementar una política de competencia muy consistente. La política de competencia pasó a ser una política de Estado, a estar al mismo nivel que la política monetaria, que la política fiscal y que la política comercial. Y a través de la implementación de políticas de competencia consiguieron mejorar significativamente la competitividad de su industria, y hoy están entre las economías más desarrolladas del mundo y más competitivas del mundo. Entonces ahí hay un buen ejemplo de cómo, si bien puede haber algún conflicto en el corto plazo, no necesariamente lo va a haber en el mediano y largo plazo. Respecto a la pregunta de Roxana, yo no sé si tengo la respuesta. Porque desde el punto de vista teórico yo soy convencido de que las agencias de competencia tienen que ser independientes del sector privado e independientes del poder político de turno. Y reconozco, como ella dice, que en Latinoamérica en general tenemos una falta de recursos, entonces es muy difícil que haya independencia del sector público o del sector privado, muy difícil. Yo creo que tenemos que probar, digamos, porque si no, la pregunta es, ¿qué es primero? Bueno, nos desarrollamos y cuando nos desarrollamos vamos a tener agencias independientes. No, para desarrollarse hay que empezar con las agencias independientes. Hay algunas respuestas. Primero, pagar buenos salarios a los reguladores independientes, para que no estén tentados ni por el poder político de turno, ni por el sector privado de turno. Y después hay mecanismos que permiten que los organismos reguladores, tanto de los servicios públicos como las agencias de competencia, sean independientes en la manera como se nombran, cómo se eligen y cómo se nombran, y los mandatos que tienen, y los impedimentos que tienen los funcionarios luego de que salen de las agencias. O sea que hay algunos mecanismos que existen para tratar de, digamos, de minimizar los problemas de la no independencia. Ahora, tampoco soy un ingenuo. En Latinoamérica, en la mayoría de los países de Latinoamérica, el Banco Central no es independiente. ¿Sí? El Banco Central no es independiente. Entonces, sería una ingenuidad pensar que el regulador de telecomunicaciones o la agencia de competencia va a ser independiente. Si el Banco Central no lo es, difícilmente lo sea. Pero lo que también nos muestra la experiencia internacional es que los bancos centrales independientes, los reguladores independientes, etc., hacen que estas políticas, la monetaria en el caso del Banco Central, la de competencia en la carrera, funcionen mejor, y el resultado sobre el funcionamiento de la economía también es evidente. Entonces, en principio, yo creo que el tema de la independencia es un tema que tenemos que seguir.
Okay, well, that's a kind of diverse and challenging set of questions I've been given. Let me start with your question, Roxana, that data is always an issue, okay, and this is true in the U.S. and other jurisdictions. But I think the way to approach this is to basically go to where the data is. You know, that is, in certain markets, like electricity prices are available, gasoline prices are available. You just go to where the data is and start the screening there. So once again, if the data is available and we stop and think about what to look for, I think screening can be broadly done. I should say that it has been done, for example, to look for accounting fraud. That's another area where the data is clearly available, and yet, once again, you have to think about what is it that we should look for. So I think screening is a general phenomenon. And it's something I should emphasize, that as we're living in a data-rich world, I mean, this is a time of what's called big data, and with improvement in computing methods, which can automatize screening, it's something that's going to be, I think, increasingly important. It really would be the basis for an investigation. You can find evidence, that of the sort that I reviewed. This would not be, that economic evidence is not sufficient anywhere, to my knowledge, to successfully make a case against firms. But what we would hope is that it would be the basis for an investigation that might uncover, the non-economic evidence. And furthermore, if you find some of that non-economic evidence, you could then engage in a more, let's say, exhaustive kind of economic analysis to get at the cause and effect. So the point is that I don't want to put too many burdens on screening. It's just really to identify markets worthy of further investigation. And then finally, on the first question of merger control, so I was unaware of what the antitrust kind of laws are regarding that until yesterday, and I was talking to a journalist from El Comercio, and he told me that there are really not merger control laws in Peru. And that certainly is a problem, because you can think about this in the context of cartels. I mean, we can merge or we can collude. And in fact, this was kind of felt to be a big issue historically in the U.S. When they passed the Sherman Act in the late 1800s, and then it took a couple of decades of judicial decisions for it to finally have an impact. Once it became clear that price fixing was illegal and would be prosecuted in the U.S., what we then observed was a horizontal merger wave. In a lot of these markets where formerly they had cartels, what were called trusts, now those things were illegal. So what we observed was this massive merger wave. And all of a sudden, in steel and sugar and whiskey and a whole lot of areas, there was, as a result of this, a highly concentrated industry. So I think it is really important to think about, I mean, there should be merger control, period, because that's something that I think any market is going to naturally gravitate to being highly concentrated unless the authorities play a role here. But it's useful to think about merger policy in conjunction with cartel policy, because those are two options available to firms. Both of them will have the market power effects of raising prices. Where the difference comes in is in terms of with merger, there may be certain cost efficiencies. There could also be other exclusionary activities you have to worry about. So, yeah, so I think I'm glad you could raise that issue, because cartels shouldn't be thought about in isolation from other antitrust issues. But thank you very much for those questions.